WellPoint's executives, and in a way, Ms. Braley, you have too, asserted that profits were not a motivating factor in raising the premiums in California. In written testimony, you indicated that you were disappointed that the critics cited profits as a primary reason that companies were increasing the cost of premiums. So let me ask you this. Right there is a document book on tab 13. Please take a look at tab 13 if we could put up on the screen. It's an email that was sent on October 7th. It's in response to a voicemail. In fact, I think Ms. Miller, I think you're the one who left the message, senior corporate actuarial wrote. The average increase is 23% and is intended to return California to a target profits of 7% versus 5% this year. So my question is, were you attempting to raise profits to 7% then in California by increasing the premiums? Was that the purpose behind this email?
We lost money in the individual market in 2009 on our California business, and the profit that we have targeted in the rate increases that we have asked to implement for 2010 is less than 2%.
But the email basically says we got to get the 7% if we're going to got to increase our premium 7% so we can add that 7% profit. Got to increase our premiums, right?
The email was sent on October 7th.
Okay.
The rates weren't filed till November 7th.
Okay.
And experience on that block
well, then let me ask you,
the medical claims continued to escalate more than we anticipated.
Sure. Let me ask you one about November 22nd, then. If it was filed on November 7th, go to tab number 22. On it, it's an email of November 2nd. And then you said you filed on November 7th from Brian Curley. I mentioned him earlier. WellPoint's Regional Vice President and Actuarial wrote, note, we're asking for premiums that would put us $40 million favorable. 1 week earlier, Mr. Curley informed Brian Sassy, the President and CEO of WellPoint's consumer business, that if we get the increases on time, we will see an upside of $30 million after downgrades and rate cap. I guess my concern is we say publicly we're not increasing rates to increase our profits, but yet these emails sort of indicate that you have to have a minimum increase in order to maintain profit.
To that. Again, it's important to remember what I just said, which is we lost money in the individual market in California in 2009, and that's not a sustainable business market. So certainly we are talking about profit increases in absolute dollars, but again, when you look at the profit margin that is built into the rates for 2010, it's less than a 2% profit margin.
Well, okay, but look, we've seen your internal corporate documents that you use to a variety of accounting mechanisms to sort of manipulate the profit figures. Look, we've seen at least 5 different accounting measures used to describe profits. The methods include pre-tax income, post-tax revenue, operating gains, underwriting margins, and profits. If I remember correctly, WellPoint, at the end of 2009, the last quarter, the last 90 days, their profit was $2.7 billion or something like that, right? $2.8 billion, that was your profit in 2009, which is a year that everyone would consider was a horrible year economically in this country. And hopefully 2010 will be better. But what I'm concerned about is our hardworking Americans are asking to increase their premiums to the wealth of WellPoint's investors. And your policyholders are taking a hit like the last panel. We see every one of them are self-employed. They're individual. You know, it's that group, basically self-employed people. They've taken 30, 40, 50% hit. But it seems like every year you got to have a profit. Is it reasonable to expect every year companies are going to have profits and we got to have at least 2.55? I mean, it'd be great if we could guarantee every business to have 2.5 to 5% profit. And heck, you're at 7% or more.
You know, actually over the 5-year period, our profit margin has declined.
The only way we're going to get more affordable is to knock off these profits that are being paid for by the average American. I mean, I don't mind you making a profit, but at the end of the year, 2009, a horrible year, you still made $2.something billion, and that's not enough.
And we serve 34 million Americans across the country, and we feel that it is appropriate for our business to be sustained so that we can be there for those members when they incur those health care costs.
Sure, and I don't mean to inject the health care debate in this whole deal, but that's why so many of us believe in a public option. you're killing the average consumer. They can't afford it anymore. We got to put an option up there. Today we're doing the antitrust exemption. Hopefully that helps.
This email says that you were considering filing a rate increase that was padded because you expected California to reduce your proposed increase. Is that an accurate conclusion to reach? Hard to understand these words differently because the words say a cushion allowed for negotiation. You decided you needed 25%, but it sounds like you were willing to go to 20%. There was a presentation prepared for your board of directors. The presentation outlined WellPoint's strategic plan for individual line of business for 2010. And let me put that slide up on the board. This slide is titled Key Assumption, Individual Pricing. It distinguishes between your rate ask and the actual rate increase you're assuming for 2010. And according to this slide, the 2010 rate ask is listed as 25% to 26%, but the assumed 2010 rate increase is just 20%. This seems to say that you were asking for a 25% increase, but expected to see that lower to 20% through negotiations. That sounds like padding. How do you respond?
Can you respond?
I'll respond to that since my team is responsible for the rate filings. It's important to note that this was prepared before the rate filing, before the rates were finalized, and it recognized the political reality that departments of insurance have political pressures and often will change rates in response to those pressures. What turned out to happen is that medical costs continued to escalate through the latter part, the last 3 months of 2009, and the 25% rate increase became necessary to achieve, as Angela said, a profit margin of less than 2% on an after-tax basis.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is you were prepared to ask for a rate higher than what you needed as a negotiating tool. You could have anticipated rates were going to go up, but you had to make a decision that you wanted an average increase of 25%, but you were really looking at an average increase of 20%. You can see the document says assumes 2-month approval delay, lowering rate increase 5%. This says exactly the same thing as the presentation to your board. It says that you're asking for more than you need because you've built in a large cushion. Here's what I think is going on. You're raising your rates far above what's necessary. You're trying to squeeze every dollar of profit you can out of policyholders in California and across the nation. And at a time when families across the nation are struggling to pay their bills, you're trying to charge them inflated rates that pad your profits and support the salaries and the trips and the retreats and everything else.